Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Dorset Pension Fund Committee on Tuesday, 24th of June 2025. For the benefit of the public attending today or watching on live stream, I am Councillor Andy Canning. I'm the chairman of this committee. My vice chair to my right here is Councillor Andy Todd. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the council website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everyone that when they are speaking, please speak directly into the microphone so that you can be clearly heard and seen. The committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting of which the public is invited. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause any undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality. Only those who have submitted a question in advance of the meeting will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. The deputation statement will be for a maximum of 5 minutes. Can I ask committee members, officers and advisors to introduce themselves the first time that they speak during the meeting? Also, I would like to welcome Councillor Steve Mercer from Dorset Council and Councillor Patrick Canavan from BCP Council, who joined the committee for the first time today. Item 1, apologies.
We've had no apologies, Chair.
Excellent. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 18th of March 2025. Is everyone happy that they are a true and accurate record of the meeting? Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Mercer.
Good afternoon, Chair. Steve Mercer from Blackmore Vale Ward. It's not a massive interest, but my wife is a pensioner of the Dorset Council Pension Fund.
Thank you. That is fine, but thank you for letting us know. Okay, moving on to, is there anybody else with any declaration of interest they need to make? All right. No, okay. In which case, moving on to public participation, item 4, 3 minutes maximum for each to be asked. Question 1, Lisa Lobo.
Oh, thank you. I'm here today as a concerned resident of Bournemouth, but also as a medical doctor working as an anaesthetist just up the road here in Dorchester, and I think I speak for many in both of our communities. Does this committee agree that the Dorset County Pension Fund must not invest in companies enabling genocide, apartheid and war crimes, nor those driving the climate emergency? Both Dorset and BCP councils have formally recognised that the climate crisis is an emergency. However, over £75 million of the Dorset Pension Fund is invested in fossil fuel companies, accelerating the climate and ecological collapse. BCP Council states an intention to become carbon neutral by 2030. Dorset Council has a target for 2040. The threat posed by fossil fuel-led climate change is critical. The UN has described us as being in a new era of global boiling with unprecedented extreme weather impacting every part of the globe with increasing frequency, and we're already seeing the impact of that here within Dorset. Meanwhile, the Dorset Pension Fund holds £173.9 million in companies complicit in Israel's multiple breaches of international law, including enforcing apartheid, maintaining the illegal occupation of Palestinian territories as ruled by the International Court of Justice last year, and now carrying out a genocidal extermination campaign in Gaza that has seen over 55,000 Palestinians killed, over 18,000 of whom were children. Another 43,000 children have been orphaned. More and more people are now dying of starvation due to a deliberately enforced famine that the UK government calls morally unjustifiable. Whilst many of those that do try and access aid at the new militarised distribution centres are shot and killed whilst waiting in line for a bag of flour. Many more civilians continue to die from preventable causes due to the targeted destruction of Gaza's healthcare system, where every single hospital has now been bombed and most are now completely out of service. Gaza has the highest number of child amputees in the world due to the indiscriminate bombing and the destruction of appropriate medical facilities and supplies, including even anesthetic to relieve the pain of children having their limbs torn apart. The pension fund invests directly in companies arming Israel, including BAE Systems, Elbit Systems, L3 Harris, Leonardo, and Lockheed Martin, to name just a few. There are many other investments in companies that are directly complicit in these atrocities and in the illegal settlements in occupied Palestine, for which the ICJ urges sanctions and arms embargoes. It is not only morally unjustifiable for this pension fund to continue investing close to £174 million in companies complicit in these atrocities, but it may also be against international law. Facilitating the transfer of weapons and ammunition to Israel may constitute serious violations of human rights and international law. So what concrete steps will this committee take to ensure public funds do not support these atrocities, nor the destruction of our planet? And with more and more pension funds around the country committing to divest, will this committee also make the same commitment? Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to this committee today on such an important and emotive subject. I am sure all members of the committee deplore the loss of life resulting from this conflict and all the many other conflicts currently happening around the world. We do not believe that the pension fund's investments support Israel's actions in Gaza, nor are these investments accelerating climate change. Later on today's agenda, the committee will be considering our response to a deputation calling on divestment from companies who provide weapons and military support for Israel. It should be noted that the companies identified in the deputation are also suppliers to the UK, NATO, and other allies, including the Ukraine. In relation to climate change, in September 2020, the committee agreed a strategy of decarbonisation, meaning a reduction in allocations of investment to companies which are high carbon emitters, and trying to influence the demand for fossil fuels, not just their supply. Since then, significant decarbonisation has been achieved through the transition of assets to the management of Brunel Pension Partnership, the pension fund's investment pooling manager, who are widely regarded as an industry leader in responsible investments. There have also been increased investments in renewables and green technologies through Brunel's infrastructure funds. Thank you. On then to question 2 from Neve.
Is that on? Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to second Lisa's statement that I also agree with everything that she said, so I thought I'd start with that. But yeah, my question is, in 2023, BCP Council voted to stop investing pensions in risky fossil fuels. A strategy of decarbonisation by percentage and engagement with asset managers has been adopted. However, this can inadvertently support increased fossil fuel production, especially considering corporate growth. Given the urgency of the climate crisis and the rapid transition we need, will the Pension Committee reconsider its current strategy and seriously consider divestment from an industry who are responsible for approximately 89% of CO2 emissions?
Thank you. We believe that engagement with companies has more chance of achieving positive real-world impacts than divestment from those companies, which simply means a sale of ownership to other parties. As I said in my answer to the previous question, the committee's current approach to the climate and ecological emergency was agreed nearly 5 years ago, so we should revisit our approach in more detail in the near future. On then to question 3 from Julianne Booker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking my question on behalf of Southwest Action on Pensions and as someone who is a Dorset Pension Scheme member. Brunel Pension Partnership and Access local government pension pools have been told to dissolve and their client authorities merge with one of the remaining 6 local government pension pools. We understand the letter to local authority clients gave 2 main reasons for this decision. namely a failure on the part of Brunel to consider a merger with another pool as a future option, and the lack of a plan to manage assets internally. As you are aware, the government has asked both Brunel and Access to provide an update by June with an in-principle decision on future pooling arrangements expected by September. Given the huge implications of this, the outlined timescale seems rather unreasonable and certainly a real challenge to achieve. Once Dorset Council Pension Committee has analysed and assessed options for the future of our pension assets, hopefully the process and timetable for final decision-making will be made public and members of the pension fund will be consulted with in some way. No doubt you are having discussions with the other client authorities in the Brunel pool, with the option of all going to the same new pool being explored. The alternative being that some or all of the client authorities decide to move to different pools. Whichever option is chosen, there will be significant costs involved in moving. It is unlikely that any new receiving pool will find it acceptable to pick up this cost. So you must be considering how this will be funded, hopefully not by the Dorset Council pension members. We assume that one of the criteria you will need to use when assessing which new pool to go to will be how well their existing setup and future plans align with the government's expectations. Likewise, that responsible investment will be a strong focus in your decision-making process. Given the leading role Brunel has established on responsible investment, you will now no doubt want to seek for that to be continued in any future arrangement. Brunel's achievements being recently reflected by Faith Ward, Brunel Chief Responsible Investment Officer, recently being awarded an MBE for services to pensions and the environment. It also seems vital that Dorset Council and Bournemouth, Christchurch and Pool's climate policies and/or transition plans will be preserved throughout this process. So the question is, given the above, what are the key criteria you are going to use in assessing the suitability of alternative pools for Dorset Council's LGPS investments? Thank you.
Thank you. The criteria used to assess the suitability of alternative investment pools will include the ability to meet the government's requirements, range of investment products offered and performance, approach to responsible investment, proposed governance arrangements, people and culture, and transition plans and costs. Including this criteria in our assessment, we'll seek to ensure that the new investment pool best serves the needs of Dorset County Pension Fund and all of its members, whilst also aligning to the government's vision for pooling. Thank you. Okay, moving then on to item 5, questions from councillors. First question from Councillor Paul Kimber.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair. Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland Ward. I want to thank you firstly for the assistance you gave me in the direction of my question, and just to give you a bit of a preamble, I've received many concerns from a wide spread of organisations, including churches, right the way through Dorset. As we as councillors have to deal with human rights as a part of our decision making, and also the many people that are really concerned about this throughout our county, there's a great deal of concern from our constituents across Dorset regarding our Dorset Pension Fund and the investments, which includes manufacturing of arms. Each day we hear about the number of children being killed in the Gaza. It probably starts the day I listen to the radio news in the morning and Radio 4, and every morning there's a number. I think we heard tonight about 17,000 children, and with two councils, or many councils in Dorset, with proud record looking after children, we have to do and listen to our constituents. Thank you.
Councillor Kimber, I also thank you for taking the time to speak to this committee today on such an important subject. As said in previous responses, I am sure all members of the committee deplore the loss of life resulting from this conflict and all the many other conflicts currently happening around the world. This topic will be covered in more detail later in the meeting as part of the response to the deputation contained within today's agenda. It should be noted that the companies identified in the deputation are also suppliers to the UK, NATO, and other allies, including Ukraine. Then to the next question from Councillor John Orrell.
Councillor John Orrell, Melcombe Regis, Weymouth. Partial apology that these questions are probably a bit repetitive, but there's also not an apology there, because we need to keep asking these questions until we see some bold action. It's gradualism. Gradualism is all very well, but we need the deaths are happening every day, so we need action today. So my question, money has become the measure of all things, mammon enthroned on high, and it seems the bottom line is the only one that counts. I've been told that before when I asked about questions on fossil fuel, that the council had to maximise its pension income. But is pension a cold, non-moral calculation? If it is, it risks becoming amoral and in turn immoral. Does it have to be this way? I would like to suggest there are counterweights in this scale of values, money on one side. On the other side, I put it to you that we should have the people and planet. People are being killed directly by weapons used on innocent children in Gaza. Should we profit from this business? The planet is being destabilised by climate chaos from industries which spew forth carbon from outdated fossil fuels. Should we profit from this business? So the question, will the council divest from fossil fuels and weapons firms which are then used on civilians in Gaza today?
I also thank you for taking the time to speak to the committee today. As said in previous responses, I'm sure all members of the committee deplore the loss of life resulting from this conflict and all the many other conflicts around the world. The pension fund's response to the events in Gaza will be considered in more detail by the committee later in the meeting this afternoon. As set out in earlier responses, in September 2020, the committee agreed a strategy of decarbonisation rather than divestment, which seeks to influence the demand for fossil fuels, not just their supply. Okay, that finishes the questions and replies. We'll then move on to item 6, which is a deputation led by Mr. Ferguson. Yes, Councillor Mercer.
Sorry, Chair, could I ask you to speak into your microphone a bit more? I'm struggling to hear you.
I apologise, sorry about that.
Are you ready? Oh.
Yes, okay. If you'd like to go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
I speak today as a constituent of Dorset, an SRA-regulated solicitor with over 10 years' experience in the city, and a businesswoman. Gaza is not an open-air prison because being born Palestinian is not a crime. To be in prison, you must commit a crime and be tried in order to pass your time there. A place you are being held purely on the basis of your ethnicity is a concentration camp. As someone who has spent more than a decade advising PLCs, investors, and local authorities, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would have to point out the pitfalls of investing in a regime with a concentration camp. With the current death toll being just under 400,000 as reported by the Israeli Occupation Force data. To contextualise, that is every single person in Dorset either reported dead or missing under the rubble. There are 15 million Palestinians on this planet. Do you think that when the dust has settled, they will not come for their reparations? They will. And at that time, the investments that you are currently making will be virtually wiped out. Are you really willing to gamble with people's pensions in this way? For what purpose? Just to say that you're supporting a dying regime. In your investment strategy, you are required to consider financially material risks and the potential impact on the financial returns of those risks if they are not managed effectively. Murdering thousands of people in a concentration camp is not a risk that can be managed. How will you manage the council's reputational risk when pension holders realise they are invested in mass slaughter? We are going to tell them, and we are going to be extremely, extremely loud about it. The investment strategy also requires the responsible allocation of capital, leading to sustainable benefits to the environment and society. The Guardian reports that Israel's mass slaughter in the first 15 months will be, and I quote, greater than the annual planet warming emissions of 100 individual countries. Not what I would call beneficial to the environment, is it? 10 councils have already divested. I know for a fact that one day you too will vote to divest. And that day is coming soon, because the truth of what the council is invested in is being uncovered, and the financial cost and risks to Dorset will keep growing and eating away at pension returns. The time to manage that risk is now, and the way to manage that risk is to divest entirely and immediately. I'm going to hand you over to Feda.
Hi, my name is Feda, and they call me Free Palestine. I'm here talking to you today, not as business people, not as people who will look into facts and make informed decisions. I'm talking to you as humans now. Because my friend, my colleague in diaspora, another Palestinian, did point out the risks, that you're facing. And I can tell you as a risk management expert with a PhD from Warwick University that you are risking your money big time, because what you're investing in is a genocide. What you're investing in is a regime that is gonna disappear in, I promise you, less than 10 years. I'm talking to you as humans here. Pensions is about future, about your future. It's a safeguarding. Would you be your safeguarding and the future of your children? Would you like it to be built on other people's ruins, on other people's coffins? Is this what you want as people? Dorset has a proud tradition of justice. Do you want to continue that tradition? Or do you choose to stick to what the stupid advisors are telling you, those who put 1 and 1 and they come out with 1,000 for a reason, people who are brainwashing you all the time and tell you this is the right thing to do? I can assure you, divesting is the best for you, financially, morally, ethically. And one day you will be able to look in the eyes of your children and tell them, we did divest. This future, the money I'm leaving you with, the legacy I built wasn't built on a genocide. We stood there and we made a decision and we did divest. I want you to wake up. I want you. And you to wake up and make a decision. Thank you. And free Palestine.
Yes, would you now leave the chamber, please? We will respond as part. We will respond as part of the debate this afternoon's motions. Okay, back to the agenda. Item 8, draft pension fund accounts and independent auditors plan. No, sorry, I got the wrong one. Item 7, sorry. Yeah, in response to the deputation. Mr. Wilkes, we want a few words to start things off.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the deputation. So I'm just going to introduce the paper. At its meeting, 15th of May 2025, Dorset Council received a deputation also from the Dorset Palestinian Solidarity Campaign requesting the Council to commit to divest the local government pension scheme fund administered by the Council from companies complicit in Israel's genocide in Gaza and violations of international law and human rights against Palestinians. This includes arms companies supplying Israel with weapons and military technology, companies providing infrastructure for Israel's unlawful military occupation of Palestinian land, and companies conducting business activity in Israel's illegal settlements on stolen Palestinian land. It was agreed that concerns raised in the deputation would be considered in more depth by this Pension Fund Committee, and similar requests have also been received by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. The recommendations for consideration by the committee for the reasons set out in the paper are the 3 recommendations. One continues with its current approach to responsible investment and to favour engagement with companies rather than divestment from them. The second is continue to endorse the Brunel Pension Partnership's exclusion of controversial weapons, such as anti-personnel mines, chemical and biological weapons, and companies non-compliant with Principle 2 of the United Nations Global Compact on Human Rights from Brunel's actively managed equity and bond portfolios. The third recommendation, prior to the meeting, in discussion with committee members, we've changed it slightly so that it now reads, investigate the costs and benefits of a survey of scheme members' views on non-financial factors as part of the next review of the investment strategy statement following the conclusion of the triennial actuarial valuation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, those are the 3 recommendations that are before us today. They've been introduced. Members of the committee are more welcome to express their opinions on these matters, in particular the 3 recommendations, obviously. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a recommendation that I can support. The first part of the recommendation is effectively to do nothing. It says that we are supposed to continue with the current approach to responsible investment and to favour engagement with companies rather than divestment from them. The very purpose of this conversation is for us to, at the very least, consider the process of disinvestment from these companies that supply arms to foreign countries. It is important, Chair, to reaffirm the previous arrangements through Brunel to exclude, in inverted commas, controversial weapons, but that's not the end of it, in my view. We should go further than that. And whilst I support a survey to gain the views of members of the pension scheme, I don't think that should preclude us from taking action to move this forward. So this isn't, as it stands, Chair, this is not a recommendation that I feel able to support. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Councillor Brown?
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Thank you, Chair. I had a few comments to make. I just want to thank the members of the public that came here and for their deputation and for their questions and for coming along to our meeting. I came outside earlier while they were outside before the meeting just to listen to the points that were being made so that I could understand the sort of the views and the strength of feeling, although I've had a lot of emails and correspondence myself, as have all members. I'm sure, like all colleagues, we are horrified by what we see happening in Gaza. I myself, I've visited Israel and Jordan a number of times over the years. I've stayed with Palestinian families, and every time I see what we see on our TV screens, my thoughts are always with those sort of Palestinian families that I know from my visits to the area. I was particularly interested in one of the questions, and it talked about divesting from certain investments and the companies that were invested in. And one of those was mentioned as Lockheed Martin. Now, point 2 in our recommendations does talk about continuing to endorse our exclusion of controversial weapons and companies non-compliant with Principle 2 of United Nations Global Compact on Human Rights. And my understanding was we've already divested from Lockheed Martin, actually, so I don't know whether that's out of date, the data that's being used in terms of looking at what investments we've got, because we have previously made decisions about investment in weapons companies. Lockheed Martin was one I know that was listed to us. I think we need to clarify with Brunel that we have fully divested from Lockheed Martin and those other companies that we were advised of a couple of years ago. So we have already been active in looking at this area, and so therefore I totally endorse point 2 to support the action that we've already taken. And I think it is important, point 3, about understanding the views of our scheme members. While I would say I'm a BCP councillor, representing Bearwood and Merley and North Pool. And I think it's important to note that while BCP Council and Dorset Council are the two major employers within the Dorset Local Government Pension Scheme, there are 343 other employers, and the staff of those 343 other employers who are also invested in the Dorset Local Government Pension Scheme that we administer the investments. So I think it's important for us not just to understand the views of members from Dorset Council and BCP Council, but all of those other employers across our scheme. So we need to come up with a way to actually talk to those members and understand their thoughts on views and how we progress on this matter. But I would say I'm in support of us taking some action on this. We have already taken action as I've said, and divested from some investments. But I think it's also important just to note what divestment means. And effectively, divestment just means we sell our shares to somebody else. It actually will probably have very little effect on those companies. It will have very little effect on exports of goods to the Middle East and to Israel. It will just mean somebody else owns the shares that we previously owned. So it sends a good message. But I think it's actually more for national government to be dealing with this matters, to make sure that its export guarantees are ensuring that weapons and components that are being supplied by manufacturers in the UK are not being used in Gaza and not contributing to the death of the thousands and thousands of people that we see. So I think it is much more important that actually the message goes to national government and our local MPs, because there's very little really as a Dorset Local Government Pension Scheme that we can do to tangibly change what is happening. Selling our shares to somebody else will have very little impact on what's actually happening on the ground. National government and our MPs across Dorset are more important constituents to actually lobby and speak to and make sure that they are taking actions at a national level.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Skeets from Westmoors and Three-Legged Cross. I welcome deputations from the public to this committee. We don't get very many, and it's a very, very strong subject that we have to listen to, and we have done. In the discussion that we've had, we as a committee understand how this committee works, what it can do, what it can't do, and why it has to take action which may fundamentally not seem so quick and effective as just stop. And I think that should be explained to the public while they're here, if that's possible, and the reason for the recommendation explained in layman's English, so that we all understand and the members of the public understand where our reasoning is on these recommendations. I support the 3 recommendations that we've set forward, and I remember and remind myself that our duty of care to our pension fund is to the members of that pension fund, and financially the state of the fund, and whatever we do and however we impact on that fund means pounds out of the pockets of pensioners and people receiving their benefits, and the balance of the fund. So if I can finish, if you could explain that reasoning, I think that would help people understand the 3 things that we set out, the reason why we've done that, the amount of time that we've taken deliberating and discussing this, because it's not obvious to people in this chamber that we've had a long discussion about this item, and it's a very important one. So can we please have that understanding, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chawata, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've read the recommendations. Sorry I couldn't be there for most of the meeting in the morning. I'm an immigrant. I grew up in Zimbabwe, which was Rhodesia back in the time. It was an apartheid system, and many Western governments stopped supplying Rhodesia with arms and everything else, and I think there's an opportunity for political leadership. There's vicarious liability, moral or otherwise, in terms of us investing in some of these companies. I want to be able to sleep well. The national government will make decisions which make immigration, more people coming into the UK, then we complain about the boats, we go and bomb those countries. We are responsible. I believe that we should stop these investments immediately. Thank you.
Councillor Rice, I believe you're next.
Yes, I would like to say thank you to all of the members of the public that have come today, and I would welcome future increased public attendance. I think the decisions that the Pension Fund Committee make are wide-reaching, and the influence that the pension fund has should be treated with a lot of respect. I believe that the 3 recommendations are not strong enough. I can understand the principles that they have been drawn up along. I've been working on trying to get the pension fund to divest from fossil fuel companies that are focused on environmental destruction rather than renewable energy. And it's been very hard work trying to get into the nitty-gritty of how pension funds invest and how difficult it is when a pension fund uses an organisation such as Brunel, and Brunel is working with another 9 pension funds to try and get an individual company removed from a portfolio of investments is tricky due to the finance structure and the setup of how they all work. But I believe that divestment is what we should be doing. We should not be allowing the 18,000 children that have been killed in Gaza to just be saying it's a bit tricky and we should be doing as much as we possibly can, given the responsibility of such a large pension fund. We were advised as a committee that divestment does not work, and yet we've just heard firsthand, and also, of course, there is an awful lot of evidence that the financial divestment of apartheid in South Africa did work. And that is why I think this is an evidence-based decision, that we should be removing all possibility that we are invested in any company that is willing to do this to another, to other people, wherever it is on the world. This is highlighting the issue of our financial systems, and it's not just Gaza. We shouldn't be able to fund this sort of violence anywhere in the world. And so I think that we should look at the divestment wording that other council pension funds have used, and consider their wording, which is in some of the documents that we've received, and that we should also write to, as an additional factor, write to all of Dorset MPs to raise that it shouldn't be possible for a local government pension fund to be able to invest in a company that is making money out of killing innocent people wherever they are in the world, and that we should also work with the other pension funds that have already agreed to divest, so that when we are looking at our new pension pooling, that we are able to collaborate with those that are trying to provide leadership in this area.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Rice. Anybody else like to speak? Any other members of the committee? Councillor Seats, yes.
Can we have the explanation that I asked for, so that people do understand in the gallery, David, why we're bound?
Right, okay, we'll suspend the meeting for 5 minutes and ask for the public to be removed from the area, please. I think that we can't hold a debate under these circumstances. Are we now back online? Okay. We will now recommence where we were on the agenda. Councillor Skeets had asked a question about to explain matters in a bit more detail. David Wilkes will respond to that question before we go on to anything else.
Thank you, Councillor Skeets. So as set out in the paper, where under the reasons for recommendation paragraphs, it sets out that the primary purpose of the pension fund is to achieve the required investment returns to pay pensions when they become due, minimising the need for additional funding in the future from scheme members and their employers. Legal opinion from the Local Government Scheme Advisory Board, King's Council's opinion was that LGPS decision makers, in this instance the Pension Fund Committee, can make decisions for non-financial reasons if it is satisfied that two conditions are met. One, that there is no significant risk of financial detriment to the fund, and two, that it would have the support of the scheme beneficiaries. And in terms of the second point in there, the support of the scheme beneficiaries, the third recommendation seeks to address that test. And the KC's opinion makes clear that it needs to be that the members as a whole would support what is being done. So the purpose of the third recommendation is to consider that second test, the member support test. In terms of the significant risk of financial detriment, there will be costs associated from a decision to divest from any companies for whatever reason. So there will be a transition cost to a new product, and then there may be other costs associated with it. It's likely that such a product would be more complex to manage, and therefore the ongoing charges of that would be higher. And there's also the risk that future investment returns could be hampered by not investing in certain sectors. So those are the reasons behind the recommendations. In discussion during the adjournment with the chair, I think one thing that we perhaps need to add to the recommendations certainly is that I think more work needs to be done to assess the financial impact of the deputation, or the views expressed in the deputation. So I would propose that we also add a fourth recommendation to investigate the financial implications of any decision to divest in further detail. Thank you.
So coming back to what I said, to take a knee-jerk reaction today, we can't do. We have to do it in a structured way, and it means taking in the views of the membership of the pension fund, who effectively will be the people who win or lose on any decision that we make. And it's our fundamental responsibility to make sure that fund is as good as it can be, and at the same time holding moral ground on what we invest in and what we don't. I think it's important that people know that.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer is next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't think this discussion or the view you take on this issue is a binary one. I don't think it's a right or a wrong one. I do think that every public company is very sensitive to public opinion. And if you have arms manufacturers, as we're discussing here, if they can see that public opinion is against that particular activity, particularly one which is, from the data I've read, is so small, actually, I think they will be encouraged to diversify out of supplying arms to regimes that are not supported by the country at large. If we look at specifically what has gone on in Palestine and Gaza, it's the proportionality for me of the response of the governments locally. And when I look at whatever conflicts go on in the world, I look at them in horror, I have to admit, and cannot understand what end they are trying to achieve. So, like many, actually, I think we ought to divest from these investments. However, I don't think people do their cause any good by heckling us from the gallery, because whatever views we have are not materially changed by somebody who is outspoken. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to say anything? Okay. I'd just like to conclude by saying I personally have found it a very difficult debate to listen to and to make judgments about, because politically and emotionally, I certainly feel that the situation in Gaza is beyond what's acceptable. The behaviour of Israel and their allies is really quite unforgivable on any humane, decent level. But the reality is, we don't live in a fantasy world where we can make gestures and that solves problems. The reality is, we're talking about the management of our pension fund, of our people who rely on the investments and need to rely on the money that their pensions will bring in future years. So that's why we try to come forward with a motion which perhaps pleases nobody, but does attempt to reach a compromise between those who would make just a strong gesture and leave it at that, and those of us who think we have to be practical in actually making changes, and then when we make practical decisions, a step-by-step approach, we can gradually make a change over time, which I think is what we can do by voting for the 4 proposals on the agenda, now on the agenda. And I have to say, it's with a heavy heart I have to vote for it, because I think the alternatives are even worse, or to be made to look at as being totally ineffective if we don't do that. So that's where I leave the things myself. Does anybody else wish to add anything, and then we'll move to the vote?
Just a matter of protocol, Chair. Sorry, is that better? If we're changing the wording of one part of the recommendations, do we need to vote on that to change it to the new thing before we then vote on all 3?
So I would say that once somebody has proposed to go with the recommendations in the report, if they agree to add David's wording on the 4th recommendation about receiving more financial information at another meeting, and then the committee could vote on that as a whole proposal.
Yeah, I still don't support the recommendations. So I just wondered whether, depending on whether they are voted through or not, the opportunity to add some additional recommendations depending on what the outcome of the vote is. I just wanted to check that that would be possible. Oh.
Do you actually have something in writing that you could read out as an alternative?
Well, it would be along the lines of writing to all of our Dorset MPs, so the ones for Dorset and BCP, explaining that we want them to work on
I think if that's what you're talking about, then that could be added to the motion. I don't see any problem with that. It's not inconsistent with either outcome, really. So we would say we would be happy to write to the MPs.
Consultation process.
Yes, part of a consultation process. Sorry, Councillor Skeets.
I will propose the change, including what David said and what's just been said, additionally, that we actually write to our MPs who are in the forefront of government. So yes, I'm happy with that, if you're happy to second.
Well, no, because I don't support the other.
Sorry, yes, all those in favour of voting for the amendment as put forward by Councillor Skeets? And those against? There's 5-4. Sorry. Okay, for 5 in favour and 4 against. Therefore, we move forward with a revised 4-point motion now. Can I see all those in favour of that motion? And those against? That's passed by 5 votes to 4. Thank you. What I propose to do is to have a 5-minute comfort break actually after that. I don't know about you guys, but I think we could do a bit of a break for 5 minutes. So if we just put this on hold for a few minutes' time. Thank you very much. Right, if you please take your seats, and we will start again at item 8, draft pension fund accounts and independent auditors report. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. The pension fund's draft accounts for 2024-25 have been completed and will form part of Dorset Council's full draft accounts that will be considered by the Audit and Governance Committee at its meeting 30th of June 2025 and then published. The Council's independent auditor, Grant Thornton's plan for the audit of the pension fund accounts will also be considered at the same meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee as part of overall planning for the Council's audit. So a copy of the draft accounts and a copy of the auditor's plan are both appended to this report. At the training session this morning, we teased out some of the key numbers from the accounts. So the value of the pension fund's assets at 31st of March 2025 was 4.1 billion. Benefits paid over the year were 182 million. Contributions received by scheme employers during the year were 138 million. Contributions received by scheme employees, scheme members, was 36 million. The total return on investments for the year was 200 million. And we also mentioned the number of scheme employers, 345, and scheme members, 83,000, of which 28,000 are pensioners. The audit has already started, the pension fund audit has already started in earnest, and we've received over 50 questions already for the team, and the majority of those questions have already been answered by the team. So a big thank you to my team for that. And lastly, the only thing I wanted to highlight that was in the audit plan, which I think it's on page 10 of the audit plan or page 68 of the pack, is that the planned materiality and triviality levels that they used last year for the 23-24 accounts have been almost doubled since then, as they gain greater assurance in the pension fund accounts and the team behind that. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
And are there any questions for David? No? Oh, yeah. Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to extend my thanks for Grant Thornton to actually coming up with a set of accounts within a year period after the previous problems that we've had. It's very acceptable. Oh, okay. But at least we got somewhere a lot quicker. Thank you.
Yes, it's because we're actually doing this, I believe, rather than anybody else. So make sure it's happened. Councillor Caravan, did you have something to say?
You can tell this is my first meeting because of this question, but would it be normal practice for these also to go to the Audit and Governance Committee of BCP?
In response to that, well, the accounts go to Dorset Council's the administering authority for the pension fund. The pension fund accounts are, and this is a national requirement, this is not something we've chosen to do ourselves. The pension fund accounts are actually appended to the main Dorset Council accounts. So the Audit and Governance Committee at Dorset Council then has the responsibility for the accounts as a whole. So they wouldn't go to any other scheme employers for approval. Thank you.
Any other questions, anybody? No? Okay. Moving then on to item 9, pension administration. Karen Gibson, wherever you are, Karen. Online somewhere.
Hello, can you see and hear me okay?
We can hear you, but we can't currently see you.
Okay, that's okay. Hearing me is more important. Okay, the administration report, just to go through that, hopefully you've all seen that, starting off with the usual performance indicators, which are set out in Appendix 1. They are all good and as expected. Does anybody have any questions on those? No? Okay. Item 3 is about the end of year processes. These are really intrinsic to the service and in fact to all things. So the end of year process is done every year. This is a huge exercise for us, and I've put some stats in there for you so that you can get a feel of what is going on and what we do. Obviously, this leads directly into the calculation of the care pension for each member, each active member, and it goes into feeding into the annual benefit statements, the valuation process, and of course into our dashboard readiness. So the maintenance of accurate data is really, really important for all these things. You'll have a look at the statistics there that tells you the number of returns that have been processed and the number of queries. Probably the thing that is most stand out is to do with the financial penalties. Now, we have a pensions administration strategy, which is there to assist the administrator and the employer in making sure that the LGPS runs smoothly for members in Dorset. I don't think we can underestimate how difficult the LGPS is for the administrators and particularly for the employers in providing this. We do often struggle with employers. We provide really good support to them, but we do impose financial penalties where employers fall short of their requirements. And you'll see that the financial penalties in 2025 are a lot higher than in previous years. Now, this is in part because we've changed our administration strategy in the last year to address certain concerns where we were having employers really not engaging with the end of year process, not providing us with data on a monthly basis as they should be doing, leading to what has happened this year and has happened in the past, whereby we are inundated with unnotified leavers and joiners at the end of the year, which we then cannot process in time for things like the valuation extract and the annual benefit illustrations, etc. Employers should be providing us with data every month, and the end of year processes just confirms the final salary, etc., and other items that we need to post. Of the total financial penalties of 130,000, 120,000 of those is a result of outsourced payrolls from schools and academies. So this is something that isn't new and that we address with those employers on a constant basis. The schools will pass on any financial penalties to their payroll provider, and certainly over the past year, this year and last year, this has led to a lot of schools changing their payroll provider to one that is more able to deal with the requirements of the LGPS, bearing in mind this really does impact members. And you'll see there the total amount of care pay posted to our records of over £573 million that has been posted. You'll see the average care pay, that's the average pay, pensionable pay, for female and male members is set out as well. You'll see that there's still that anticipated and expected gender difference there as well. And the number of members we posted, this is our active members of course, was over 30,000. Also, of course, on top of this, we have added the annual care evaluation, that's to active care accounts, and added pensions increase to our pensions in payment and our deferred pensions. So that's that item. Does anybody have any questions on that?
No questions.
No? Okay, item 4 is about a consultation that MHCLG have just released, changing the LGPS regulations in a number of areas. This is looking at access and fairness, and it's quite a big consultation, so it's worth having a look. We have already discussed this with our employers at our recent employer meeting, because there is a number of items here that directly impact employers. So it's worth having a look at this. And this contains various things. I've tried to highlight the sort of most relevant ones. The first one being the equalisation of survivor pensions. Now, the LGPS provides pensions to spouses and cohabiting partners. Historically, a pension was only payable to a legal spouse. Over the course of time, that has changed to pensions being provided to civil partners, cohabiting partners, and same-sex partners, for example. Unfortunately, as sometimes does happen, as the regulations change, they've not been consistent, meaning that some survivors are getting benefits paid on a different level to others. This has been challenged in other public sector schemes and gone through court, and there have been successful challenges. So the LGPS is now changing to ensure that there is equalisation of all survivor pensions in the LGPS. So that's a real positive. That will is very good for our members, and those benefits will be backdated to December 2005. This does mean that when these regulations are laid, if this goes through, these are obviously proposals at the moment, that we will be looking back over our records to find anybody whose entitlements need to change to pay arrears. The other thing that is changing, and this again is something we've waited for quite a long time, and Dorset has been in touch with MHCLG over this particular item at 4.3 for a number of years. This is where there's some age discrimination in the regulations over the payment of a death grant to a pensioner member, which is as a general rule, and it doesn't apply to all pensions because depending on when somebody retired and what regulations they retired under, but if they retired more recently, it will be a 10-year guarantee of your pension in payment when you retire. However, there's a cap at 75, age 75. So that is being corrected so that the 10-year guarantee, if you want to call it that, applies across the board regardless of age. So this is something we've waited for quite a long time. Again, that's quite a positive and not a huge financial impact to the fund. 4.4 you'll see as the start of a number of changes that the government have been looking at as a result of the gender pensions gap. So they have been working the Scheme Advisory Board looking at this in the LGPS. Obviously, you've got huge wide issues here in regard to gender pension gap. But what the government have done here is they've looked at the LGPS and looked at what could be done within those regulations to make opportunities for pension accrual better for women and more fair for women. The first one is to do with unpaid leave over 30 days, and this is cost alignment. So if somebody takes unpaid leave over 30 days, they are required to buy back any lost pensions should they wish to do so, and most of course elect not to. They can buy back any lost pension, but what they pay for buying back lost pension is more than the contributions they would ordinarily have paid. So this has been highlighted in the research done by the Scheme Advisory Board, and Dorset Pension Fund have contributed to that as well. So the proposal is that the contributions that would be payable in those circumstances are the contributions that would ordinarily have been paid by that member, which is fairer. There is more detail in the consultation, and there are other options as well, but that's the one that the government prefers. Unpaid leave under 31 days. It's worth noting that before the 2014 scheme came into effect, any unpaid leave under 30 days was deducted under a non-pensionable code, meaning that the member automatically paid pension contributions, meaning that they didn't lose any pension. The rules changed in 2014, so members now lose pension for any unpaid leave, and they can buy back that lost pension. And it's very common in the LGPS, because we have a lot of people working in schools, for people to take short periods of unpaid leave, primarily for childcare. So we see this a lot in schools where people are contracted to work during term time and not able to take annual leave during that time. I've noted there as well, and these are figures that I think I've given to you before, that about 90% of unpaid leave is taken by women. So the government is proposed to return to the pre-2014 approach, meaning that any absence under 31 days is automatically pensionable for members, with employer and employee paying the normal contribution rate. So in effect, we're looking at small amounts of pension here that for women, if you've lost one day, it's really not much of an impact to your pension. But I think it's accumulation of unpaid leave over somebody's career that is likely to have some impact. 4.7 is about child-related leave. So we're looking here primarily at things like maternity and adoption leave, where people commonly will have an entitlement to some contractual pay for 9 months, and then a further 3 months optional unpaid leave. Now, we've looked at data recently, and we can see that that optional 3-month period is usually taken by members. But they usually choose not to buy back the lost pension, probably because their finances are a bit stretched at that time, having just been on maternity leave and had a baby. What the government is proposing here is to make this additional maternity leave, so that's the portion that is currently offered as unpaid leave, for the employer to pay the contribution so that that remains pensionable. That would mean that for anyone taking maternity or adoption leave, for example, they would not lose any pension entitlement during that time. This is one area that employers may want to look at because there is a cost here to the employer. And we have encouraged our employers to look at the consultation and to respond. Another thing that is proposed under these consultation is reporting on the gender pensions gap, so that this will be mandatory. So this will be encompassed in the evaluation and published in the annual report. And employers with more than 100 members, those figures would be included in their annual rates and adjustments certificate. So these are figures that would become public, so we'd put them in the annual report for the valuation year, not by individual employers, I don't think, but for the fund as a whole. Again, the government has been looking at opt-out data, and again, the Dorset Pension Fund and Dorset Council have contributed some data for the background to this over the past year. And the government is interested to understand the reasons why people opt out of such a good pension scheme, and are interested in understanding the reasons for that. I think, as I've explained before, it's really difficult for us to provide opt-out data because members have a right to opt out from day one, and we don't maintain records for anybody that opts out from the start of their employment. So we had to go recently to our employers to ask them if they would be kind enough to give us some data that they held on their payroll so that we could get a picture of how many people have opted out of the LGPS, and I think I provided you with that information previously. So what the government is proposing here is, again, with some mandatory reporting of the opt-out data and collecting the demographic and equalities data around that. So there's quite a lot of detail and suggestions about how that will be done, and I think that there's quite a lot to be discussed about the practicalities of getting that data and how it will be stored, etc. So again, that's an aspect for employers to consider as well as the administrating authority. Other things mentioned in the consultation is some technical changes around the MacLeod remedy, just really putting things right that have cropped up that mean that the regulations didn't anticipate or were not well written in the first place. They just need to change them. The other thing that is really important is 4.11. This is forfeiture. Now, this is something we have been asking for in the technical group nationally for many years, in actual fact, and this again benefits employers in a positive way. So forfeiture is where an employer can reclaim any losses from somebody's pension. At the moment, the regulations are written in such a restrictive way that the circumstances under which that can be done are just very, very small and remote. So, for example, the member has to have been dismissed because an offence committed. So if somebody has left before the offence has come to light, then forfeiture can't apply. So in a way, the regulations are just not best worded and need to be looked at again, so that it can be opened up and better used as part of the regulations and make it more in line with other public sector pension schemes as well. So that's a positive. There are some other small changes as well. Some of them are just correcting wording within the regulations. So the government is looking for views on that in regards to any cost and administrative concerns. Does anybody have any questions in regard to that?
No questions.
Okay, Item 5, I'm mentioning here the Fit for the Future changes in relation to governance requirements. And you'll probably be aware of these. We've looked at the Good Governance report previously, and this is bringing forward those recommendations. So one of the things is administering authorities will be required to prepare and publish a strategy for governance, a training strategy, and a conflicts of interest policy. And the government will work with the Scheme Advisory Board to develop guidance on that. I think you may be aware that there is a requirement for members of the board to have knowledge and skills to fulfil their duty, but not on the pension fund committee. So it's about broadening that to make sure that everybody has the requisite skills and knowledge to fulfil their roles in terms of governance. There's also the requirement for a senior LGPS officer that each fund will need to appoint, and you can see the areas of responsibility that role will have listed under 5.3. Administration strategy and annual report. So things like this, a lot of funds like us, we already do a lot of this, and we have, when the Good Governance review came out, we did go through with one of the actuary firms actually to review what we did to make sure that we were doing everything that we could do in terms of governance. So some of these things we already do, which is good. There'll be updated guidance on the annual report. An independent governance review as well, with provision for this being made in the Pension Schemes Bill. And an independent committee advisor, has been some discussion around this, but this position wouldn't have voting rights. So the government are hoping, this closes on 7th of August, and they're hoping to have some provisional regulations out in the autumn. Does anybody have any questions on anything there? Just to move on to update you on the usual suspects. First of all, the dashboard. We have appointed through a framework an external ISP provider for us to connect to the dashboard, and that's Aquila Hayward. So we're not using our current software provider. We're using Aquila Hayward, and work is underway to already start that. We have a connection deadline of 31st of October 25, and we are currently looking at the extract reports and looking at errors and going back and forth to make sure that all of our data is right and that these reports, which will be uploaded every day to the dashboard, will work. Just a reminder on the dashboard that although we have to connect by October, the dashboard itself won't be available to the public for some while, because all pension schemes in the UK have to connect to the dashboard before it can go public. So we're not actually sure how long that will take, whether it will be 1 or 2 years, we're not sure. In terms of McLeod, an update, we have had software delivered into our test environment, which we have been testing. And this is what we need to deliver the retrospective work back to 2014, which you will be aware of from our previous discussions, that there has been guidance to say that this work needs to be done by the 31st of August this year. Well, clearly we're not going to be in a position to do that because of the late delivery of the software. And in actual fact, what we are testing at the moment, we have identified a number of errors. So the delivery into the live environment of this, I think in early July, it's unlikely to be met. So what we have done here is we have made a statement that we intend to defer, including the McLeod data in our annual benefit statements until 2026, and I need to notify you of that so that gets approval, because we simply are not able to meet that deadline. It's not a statutory deadline. Some of the other public sector schemes have had statutory deadlines. It is guidance, but we need to make a statement to say that we're not going to be able to meet the 2025 deadline implementation. So could I ask for agreement from the Pension Fund Committee that we can defer to 2026 the provision of the McLeod data in the annual benefit statements?
Sure. Can we see all those are happy with that? Yes. Anyone against? Yeah. Anyone against? No, that's approved.
Okay, thank you. I mean, obviously, once we have the software in our live environment and everything is fully tested and we are happy, we will put together a plan which we will again update you on to make sure that the remedy work, which is substantial as you can imagine, will be done. It is going to be a huge amount of work. You know, for example, active members who have reached 65 plus who need a separate calculation, people might not be aware of a small group like that. We've got 13,000 of those alone. So we've got to go revisit retirements, transfers, death benefits, etc. So it's going to take quite a long time. At the moment, we are looking at underpins. The smallest we have found is 10 pence and the highest is £3,455. So there's quite a variance there. And although at the moment in the testing is only looking at about 1.66% of members, we don't think the software is right, and we expect about 5% of members to qualify for an underpin once everything is in place. And our testing team, I have to say, have been absolutely excellent working with the software provider to do the testing. So there's just Dorset and two other very large funds, and I think Dorset has raised about half of the errors. So our team is doing a really good job working on that. So that's the end of the report. Does anybody have any questions or anything to raise?
No questions. And I just want to say, Karen, thank you very much for the hard work you and your whole team are putting into it. It always really appreciated what you're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, then on to item 10, pension fund investments. David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to briefly summarise the key points relating to the pension fund's investments for the quarter. We've also got, I haven't got my glasses on, I can't tell if Steve Tyson, our independent investment advisor, is still online, who may be able to expand on the economic and market background and how it impacts on our investments. And we've also got Tim Dixon from Tim Dixon from Brunel Pension Partnership as well. So some of the key points in the brief summary, I think I've mentioned the value of the pension assets several times over, so I won't say that again. Total return for the quarter was -0.4 compared to the combined benchmark return of -0.1. The total return for the year was 4.7 compared to the benchmark return of 7.4. Annualised returns for 3 years were 3.6 compared to the benchmark return of 5.5. And for 5 years, 8.7 compared to 9.5. Markets saw high levels of volatility over the quarter. Markets started strongly but ended weakly due to growth fears arising from uncertainty around US tariffs. In the UK and Europe, we did see positive returns as investors switched out of US stocks. Volatility has continued into this current quarter, and Steve and Tim may be able to comment on that further. The government's response to its consultation on proposed measures to focus on improvements to LGPS investment pooling has now been published, and with no substantial changes to the measures that were proposed in the original consultation. And in addition, the administering authorities of 2 of the 8 LGPS investment pools, which is Brunel Pension Partnership and Access, received a joint letter from the Ministers for Pensions and for Local Government advising us that we would need to identify a new pool to work with by 30th of September this year. And we have I think it may be the next substantive item on this agenda where we'll discuss that in further detail. I didn't have anything else to say, Chair. I don't know if you want Steve to say anything.
I am here if needed.
Did you want to add anything, Steve?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Only that which is in my report, really, which, do you want me to cover that now or hold that off till later in the agenda?
No, you can talk about that now if you want to.
Okay. I won't cover the points that David has mentioned already. My second paragraph on page 4 of my report, which starts my previous report, talks about performance. Obviously, we've discussed the performance of Brunel a lot over the past few years and the issues behind that. But I highlight there may be some early signs of the underperformance is ending. The head of Brunel listed equities reported that 6 out of the 7 listed funds are ahead of benchmark year to date. That was at a meeting that we had with him in late May. And Brunel continues to report that performance versus peers is acceptable. There's some truth in that. It's been a difficult environment for active managers. David has referred to the global environment. Obviously, it's highly uncertain. Navigating the Trump situation is very difficult in terms of knowing what's really going to happen. It creates a lot of economic uncertainty, and it creates a lot of uncertainty for business. But what are the implications for our strategy? We've made no changes since the Trump inauguration, but I mentioned in the fourth paragraph about one thing we did do in Q4 last year was to move a portfolio of about 300 million from the Brunel Paris Line benchmark passive portfolio to the Brunel Low Volatility Fund. And in Q1, those two funds, the Brunel one, which we'd sold, was down 7.9%, and the low volatility one did what it said on the tin. It was not very volatile, so it produced a return of 0.3%. I calculate that roughly that would have saved about £25 million of performance alone from that one decision. Now, that's a great start. I think we all felt it was the right thing to do at the time. It was a good decision. History has a habit of teaching us not to get too confident. However, the Mag 7 are not dead yet. It does lead me on to a point about the US in world indices. We've agreed many times in the past that perhaps they are too high a proportion of the world index at 70%. I think that's too high. I did a look-through calculation to see what proportion of the Dorset Pension Fund is invested in US equities. And I put the statistic in there, which is worth reflecting on, which is that 30% of the total fund of Dorset is in US equities. Does this pass the reasonable test? Now, I don't exactly answer that question here. And in any case, if we thought it was unreasonable, there's not a great deal we can do about it at the moment. Combination of other things that are at the forefront of mind at the moment, some of which have been discussed earlier today, and some of which are about to be discussed next, which is the choice of the next pool. But it's just worth reflecting on 30%. It's quite a lot, in my opinion. I refer to the unexpected directive from central government in the next paragraph, and then the key sentence is really Dorset's choice of pool partner for the future is probably the most important investment decision, or most important decision, should I say, that the committee will take in many, many years. It is absolutely crucial we try and find a partner, find a pool that will last long into the future. I think we're probably all aware of that. So that is very important, and we should devote a lot of time to that. And we have to make a decision on quite a time frame. I can understand why that's been chosen as a time frame to get on with it, and I think it's just coming up on the agenda. But a lot of work will need to be done in time for September. That's the end of my comments. I just want to mention one thing maybe in relation to the earlier discussion on the fourth recommendation, the risk of financial detriment or implications of disinvesting in defence stocks. I mean, I think that strikes me as a piece of work that is necessary. So that's something that I'll quite happily help out on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Steve? Councillor Mercer.
So I didn't hear what percentage of the fund was in US equities. What was that number?
30%.
Right. So I am new to this committee, but so the Dow Jones has grown 71% over 5 years. And whilst I'm not suggesting that we put all monies in US equities, if I look at that second paragraph of that summary, and we were very conscious today, weren't we, of returns and the interest of the of the members, and particularly my wife, we seem to be under-hitting the benchmark in every metric we've got over 5 years. So I am new to this. I'd just be interested in some background to that and what's being done about it.
Okay, well, Councillor Mercer, I'll be quite happy to take some time offline doing that with you, because there's quite a lot of history there. It's been a difficult few years for Brunel, essentially, with the performance of most of their funds, and there are many factors that have contributed to that. We've talked about it in terms of headwinds that Brunel has faced. Headwinds have been things like the Ukraine war, rising interest rates, and just basically the headwind of responsible investing actually has been, of course, a headwind as well. So it's been one thing after another, really, for a number of years. A big factor in the past 18 months has been US stocks and what has been named the Magnificent Seven. We've talked about this quite a lot as the committee in recent quarters. These are the big 7 stocks like Alphabet and Meta, Apple, Nvidia, Tesla, and so that's why a lot of active managers have been underweight those stocks, and consequently haven't matched the benchmark. Brunel has been in that camp. They've failed to meet the benchmark, but they've perhaps even fallen short of what the average, what some managers have done over the past sort of 5 years. So it's been quite a difficult period. But happy to take that offline if you want a bit more detail.
Yes, Councillor Mercer.
Thank you for that. All those bumps in the road, though, have been experienced by everybody, haven't they? It's not just Brunel. Forgive me, you don't operate in a different market to anyone else.
Yes.
Steve, do you want me to? Sorry.
I think it would help matters if you had an offline discussion, in the sense that it's easier to go into more detail that way. It's a shame you couldn't make the meeting this morning, because we covered quite a bit of that ground earlier today. But I'm sure Steve's quite happy to speak to you on the phone and sort of that. And David.
Sorry, it's Tim Dixon from Brunel here. Can I just say a couple of words? I appreciate we're a bit short of time, but just on that question, it is a good question. Active managers, as Steve mentioned, have struggled in general against benchmarks. And actually, if you look at the performance of our funds over the last 3 years on peer group, where you compare them to how other fund managers have done, they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. So we've got 4 funds in the top half and 3 in the third quartile. So it'll be unfair to say we've done significantly worse than peers, but it's right to point out that we have done worse than benchmarks, and there has been a number of factors for that, and that is worth spending a bit more time than we've probably got than we can spend on it today.
Tim, we've got you online, did you want to add anything to what Steve's comments were in general?
Yeah, just I think that they're very, very reasonable and fair comments. I would just say the data that Steve quoted in terms of 6 of the 7 active funds you're in outperforming year to date, that remains the case. And it is worth pointing out that our best performing global fund remains global low volatility this year. So I do think the timing of that it does look very good when we look back. I've mentioned the peer group data. I don't think I've got anything in addition to that, but I'm happy to take any questions if there's specific areas that any of the committee are interested in.
No, I think there are no questions. They're burning anyone pockets. No. Okay. I don't have anything to add. Do you have any questions, Mr. Stephen? No. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Tim. You're getting off lightly today, probably because we're all overheated actually from earlier. Okay, moving then on to item 11, dates of future meetings.
I didn't want to say anything other than what's there. Actually, one thing, Tuesday the 9th of September 2025, I think as we said in the training earlier, there was a couple of big things happening this year. One is the triennial valuation results, which we're expecting in September, but I think we've provisionally put a backstop meeting in people's diaries in case the initial fund results aren't ready in time for the September meeting. So it's quite early in September. And also, as has been alluded to previously, and we'll talk about soon, the government's deadline for us choosing a partner that will accept us in terms of pooling, the deadline for that is the 30th of September as well. So quite a lot to happen in September. And then just we do training on the morning before every meeting every quarter. So I think whilst that does make it a long day, I think members have generally supported that rather than doing it on 2 separate days. But obviously we're always happy to listen if members would prefer to do it over 2 consecutive days rather than one solid day. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yes, we're sticking with Tuesday the 9th of September as the date at the moment, but don't be too surprised if we have to choose a second meeting a bit nearer the end of the month, or maybe an alternative meeting, depending on how things pan out accordingly. Okay, that's it for that item. Any urgent items? There are none. Okay. Exempt business. We need someone to move the exclusion of the public, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask if I will be cut off?
So that ends the public section of the meeting, and we'll go into exempt business.